The world is saved. The living room's dark, save for light being cast from the big TV screen and the imminent sunrise that's teasing the one starry sky with whispers of morning.
Hey, George.
Hey, Lions. How's it going?
I have a pop quiz question for you. You ready?
Leonardo. Sorry, what's the quiz?
No, that'll come later.
Okay.
So, the question is, what is going to inevitably happen when the evil Shredder attacks?
Those turtle boys won't cut him no slack.
Yeah, you did. I have been singing the theme song like you probably have for weeks now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking earlier, I was like, how am I going to open the episode? And then when I wrote this down, I was like, is this stupid? No, he will get this. He will 1000% get this.
Oh yeah. No, actually, so playing this game and also playing the game we're going to be playing next, and so Teddy was like, this game's amazing, like for the new one, right? And I was like, yeah, no, it's good. Mm-hmm. You want to see a TV show that kind of circles around a similar subject matter?
It's got similar theming.
Yeah, all kind of the same. And Teddy said, yeah. And man, watching the intro to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles TV show, I did not realize how much of that was still rattling around in my brain. Not only the song, but like the visuals, So yeah, no, it's once a turtle, always a turtle, man. Like it's just in you.
Yeah. And I say all of this to say this, which is, this game is on a relatively short list of games that it is, I am sure, impossible for me to be completely objective about, right? And I mean, we're never completely objective, even when we try to believe that we are. And I mean, we humans, like, even when we believe we are, like, we almost never are. But I'm super aware of just my deep, deep love for these characters and this universe and this style of game. Like, all of their games, this is the first one like this, but then they all are like this from that point on, right? We played for fairly early episode. Yeah, we did. That was pretty early. I think that was less than 100.
It was less than 100. I think we were at least a year in.
Yeah. So pretty early, but it's like if some feelings creep in, like that's fine. Feelings are okay sometimes.
We will be objective as we can be.
Right. Yeah, but that now that we've done the sponsored by Pizza Hut disclaimer, like we no longer have to feel ashamed of eating this delicious stuffed crust pizza.
Yeah. So what is your nostalgia experience for this particular game?
Oh, I'm sorry. I will get to that, but quickly because we have a few listeners that have complained. You know who you are. I have to say this game originally came out in the arcades in October of 1989. Then it was ported to the NES next year. We played the NES port version, of course. And if you somehow don't know what the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles arcade game series is like, here's a quick summary. You get to pick your favorite Ninja Turtle and then stab hundreds of color-coordinated Foot Clan to death so that you can rescue April O'Neil in this NES port of the classic beat 'em up arcade version. So, there was a Nintendo Turtles game before this that we will probably play eventually because it is infamous. But this is the first game in the style of the arcade game that all future Ninja Turtles games were based on. My nostalgia experience for this is two things. One, I played this game a lot. Two, I think because after I fired this game up, I was like, oh no, my brain has just lumped all of the Turtles arcade games together. Like this game, the Manhattan Project and Turtles in Time, plus their actual arcade counterparts, which are different, right? Like they're all just one big turtle soup of memories. So like, I know that I played this game. I know when in my childhood I would have most been playing an original Nintendo before I kind of switched wholesale to the Super Nintendo. So I can guess which like friends and cousins I probably played this game with the most, but those memories are like, they're a mishmash. Like if this was a movie, there'd be a thick fog and you'd hear two people's voices at the same time because you're not sure, did I have this conversation with John or with Tom, right? Like yeah. So I played it a lot, I think, probably. Kind of like the way you described Diablo and Diablo 2. Like that's sort of where I'm at with arcade Turtles games.
I mean, and I'm in very much so the same boat. I am actually less sure that I did play this one because I played a billion hours of Turtles in Time. Like that was my that was my Ninja Turtles game. Like the sound effects, the pizza, I can still just close my eyes right now and remember certain parts of the level. So I may have played this a little bit, but also for us, at least in my memory, I remember a time when the NES was the only console that I had, but that was a relatively short amount of time, I got an NES, and I think 2 years later, I got an SNES when it was on the earlier edge, and then the Genesis came out not too long after that, and then that, having all three of those consoles at the same time, was what I remember the longest, so I say that to say, why would I play Ninja Turtles for the NES when I probably within a couple of years had access to Turtles in Time, which is just, a superior game. Like it's not this would be like the Mega Man X2, not Mega Man X6, right? Where it's like they took everything and then they honed it and made it nicer and prettier and rounded off some of the edges as opposed to, that. So I probably played it a bit, but mostly played Turtles in Time.
We have a couple like diehard Mega Drive Genesis people, so before they feel obligated to like hate at you on Twitter, I will tell you, technically the Sega Genesis was a contemporary of the Nintendo first and then the Super Nintendo, even though they're both 16-bit consoles. That was the whole thing, is like they went to 16-bit kind of early, and that gave them some benefits, but it also caused them some problems because then by the time Nintendo said, okay, we're ready for 8 more bits, they were also way better at designing video games. So like there was,
right.
Yeah. So technically the Nintendo and the Sega, don't get me wrong, in my mind, you have the 8-bit generation and the 16-bit generation, but if we're being pedantic. So anyway, shall we chill?
We shall. Just one side thing though is that I think that that was a similar thing that killed the PlayStation Portable, right? Was that it was way more powerful hardware than anyone was really willing to program for like a portable,
Oh, I think you might be thinking of the Vita, the second one.
Yes. I think so. But yeah, where basically it was like, it's basically like having a PlayStation in your pocket, and it's like, so that means I got to pay $60 for a pocket game. Well, no, we'd still want you to pay only $40, but now no one's going to design for this amazing hardware, and so everybody, whenever the console wars flame up, and they're like, this console is twice as powerful. Is anybody programming for that though? For all of those extra horses, all those extra ponies? Are they in the stable, or are they running around doing a pony show because matters?
Dude, so it's Betamax and VHS, right? When people are like, oh, Betamax is the superior format, it's like, right, but if I go to a store right now and I want to buy a copy of a movie that I love, what format are they going to be selling it in? Because I need a player that will play Indiana Jones and Ghostbusters and Back to the Future. I don't actually really care what the thing is. I just want to watch this movie I want to watch. And that you're 1,000% right. Like the PlayStation Vita was such a tragedy because it was such an incredible piece of hardware, and it just it's so sad.
So yes, we shall chill.
If you want to hear more of this, you should of course subscribe to the show. You can find us on the internets at nostalgiagoggles.audio. You can find us on Twitter. You can find the game list on our website, the feedback form, all those links in the show notes. I also stream most of the games that we play on Twitch, so if you want to see kind of some behind the scenes before the review gets released, you can find me on there as well. If you want to support us a little bit, easy thing to do is rating and review. But if you really want to go the extra mile, I think personal recommendations are always the best. Somebody you know that loves classic video games, go tell them, check out the show. Especially if they've never heard of a podcast or they don't listen to any podcasts, because you get them into that sweet podcast drug, and then they're into it. If you really want to go crazy, you can support us on Patreon. And everybody who supports at all levels gets the after show for as little as $1. You can get a bunch of extra content. And then if you support us at higher levels, you may actually get your name shouted out on the show. So with that, we need to first thank our 8-Bit Classics, Jacob.
A leading Leonardo.
Yarno.
A dynamic Donatello.
Jason.
A righteous Raphael.
John.
A monkeying around Michelangelo.
And Kevin.
Television ready April O'Neil.
Our 16-bit hero, Michael.
A skull cracking Casey Jones.
And our full 3D supporter, David.
The Super Shredder.
Dude, the Super Shredder at the end of Shredder's Revenge is like pretty uncanny. Like he's unsettling.
He is, one, very uncanny, but two, exactly what I remember Super Shredder being like from Turtles in Time.
Right?
You know, like
scary.
Same ability sets, same like, lightning. I mean, game's good, but that game's good. We will talk about that game next week because and I'll share this for the other episode too. But I woke up at like 1 a.m. because my brain had made a connection on a visual in that game that I immediately hopped online on my computer and double checked a YouTube video to like make sure that I was thinking of it correctly, and I was correct, and I made a note of it and went back to sleep. It was just so weird to be shot awake by like my brain saying, "Hey, I made a new correlation. This is time sensitive. Wake up."
I wish more often my brain was like, this is important to you and you have the ability to document it, because it seems like more often than not, way later, I'm like, oh, that thing was important and I didn't write it down.
But yeah, no, it was just like, I was like, that wasn't time sensitive brain, but I do think this was a good use of my time. So well done, brain.
Well, and what a perfect link right into audio visuals for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, the arcade game, which they had to call it 2 because the NES already had a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about this.
So I just right out of the gate, I got to say, this is an arcade port, which means they had to, dumb it down to what the NES could handle. They were not willing to take a B effort from the Nintendo. They pushed the Nintendo maybe too hard because in the first stage, things look good, right? The turtles look good. The enemy sprites, all the foot soldiers all look good. They're
when you can see them, yes.
Yeah, right. The environments look good. The way people interact, like they have their grabs and they have weapons and they have jumping animations and that, like, everything actually looks really great. Except, to your point, it is often flickering in and out of reality, so much so that in the later levels, when there's more enemies on screen and there's like a bunch of environmental hazards and there's all kinds of crap going on, sometimes you're just blind fighting. You are just swinging in the nothingness because the enemies have completely blinked out of existence. And because all these enemies are actually made up out of multiple sprites, they like Cronenberg out of existence, where huge chunks of them will disappear, but not the whole sprite, because the sprite is made up of multiple tiles and only some of the tiles aren't being rendered. So it's like, it's such a shame because it's not the art's fault, right? The art is excellent, but there's just too much of it.
It's way too much. It's way too much. And the thing is that I really do feel that the developers and the NES, this is the NES, picking up like its 3 kids, and like holding it on its shoulders, but it used to be able to do that when their kids were 4, but now they're all 6, but it's not willing to let go of that yet, so it's just sitting there grunting its way up the mountain, just drenched in sweat,
my knees, my back.
Everything's on fire, which it is in the first level. And honestly, that was the thing that kind of keyed me into it, where, I boot up the game and I'm like, all right, let's do this thing. And the fact that the entire front of the first level is constantly flickering and the fire animation is solid, And so I was looking at it, I was like, wow, that looks good. And then I paused it to write down, that looks good. And it kept going, man. Like the fire never stops, and I was like, that's kind of a cool little feature that they just kind of keep it going, and I was like, this is...
So what you're saying is we didn't start the fire, it was always burning.
Since the world's been turning, man. keep giving me song lyrics. I'll keep. Yeah. So I say all that to. So at first I was like, oh man, this is deeply impressive. You know what? Well done, bravo. And then I started playing the game. I was like, oh, there it is. You know, where when things started to kind of flicker out of existence, and I was like, oh man, I knew it had to be too good to be true because physics, you know. But they had me going there for a minute, man.
Well, and it's you've been playing the game for a while before I would say it becomes problematic, right? Because things start flickering in the first level if you let too many foot soldiers come onto the screen, right? There's too much noise and things will flicker, but they flicker for a second, or you kill an enemy and then they stop flickering, you know, once it gets below some threshold. But then in, I don't know, I would say starting in maybe like level 6 or 7, it's basically nonstop. Like, unless you are between scenes and there are no enemies on the screen and no environmental hazards firing, it is just things, you and the enemies, just blinking in and out of existence. Remember, in chunks, which I think may actually be worse because it's like, yeah, I still know where I am, but I have this giant, you know, perfectly square chunk ripped out of my chest or off of my face. And it's just, it's very unfortunate because everything looks so good. Like, I was not blown away by like the level of artistry, but I have very clear mental pictures of Turtles in Time, right? Both in the arcade where it looked incredible and on the Super Nintendo where it still looked really good. So to boot this up and not immediately point and laugh at its, you know, pale imitation of games that came out several years later was like, oh damn, this actually looks pretty solid. But then, oh god, just the flickering is just, there were times I died in later levels because I was like, oh, that enemy was attacking me and I literally couldn't see it.
Right. Side note, the way they handled blind fighting in 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons is way better than 3.5, and we can talk about that in the after show.
All right, I will put that in the notes.
Yeah. I just I had a reason to look that up recently. I was like, oh god, this is just so much better. Anyways, so one of the things I did say, one of my top notes is that I think that the turtles themselves look really good, you know, in the sense that, you know, they couldn't make them huge and take up all of the screen because it's Brawler, right? You know, the bigger you are, the bigger you are to hit, right? But despite the fact that the turtles don't take up a lot of the screen, I thought that they did a really good job, especially considering that, you know, so they decided to make the turtles always stare at you, right? But I think that
when you are not moving, they are staring directly into the camera, which I actually thought was an odd choice.
It was odd, but I think it was probably the way to go, just because I think that that's what looked the most like a Ninja Turtle, you know?
It does give you the silhouette.
Right, you know, whereas if they did it forward, they would have had to do that weird, you know, because I was watching some of the animated series. Yeah, like the weird kind of turtle half-beak thing, you know? And that would have been weird, you know, and especially when dealing with that many pixels. So I think that was actually a good choice, or probably the best choice that they had. And the other thing that I think probably saved them a little bit of memory was the fact that all of the turtles are just palette swaps of each other. So, you know, once they drew a really nice turtle, they just swapped the colors on them and then gave them a different weapon. Now, that being said, is that they did do, which I appreciate, different animations for all of the different like attacks, you know, because they're all wielding different weapons. So and that's kind of one of the big things about Ninja Turtles, man. When you played Ninja Turtles as a kid, you know, like whoever was Ninja Turtle got 2 sticks, and whoever was playing Donatello got 1 big stick, and whoever was playing Raphael got like 2 really small sticks, and whoever played Michelangelo sucked. So I've forgotten how
he's a party dude.
He is, you know. And sorry, Bucknell, who's absolutely the Michelangelo of our group, but no, I remember that was always a pain because like, how do you do that with, because with all the other Ninja Turtles, you could just do sticks that you could find, you know, but with Michelangelo,
you gotta tie them together with vines, because apparently we're like raised by wolves children.
I was gonna say, like, you had to go find some rope, and then, you know, your parents never have, you know, a couple of segments of 1-inch rope or 1 foot rope, so then you end up with a huge long piece of rope hanging out. It's a mess. I say all that to say that they do have different attack animations. I couldn't tell. From what I could tell, I think the answer to this is no. I don't think that there was any difference in range or damage that the different attacks did.
I was trying to figure this out myself, right? And this is let's save the particulars of this for gameplay. We could say right now that the animations are they're varied in their presentation, right? Like the way Leonardo swings his swords looks like a sword swing, whereas the way Michelangelo swings the nunchucks looks like a nunchuck swing, right? So it's like they do look very different in their like tonality, but they don't look very different in their functionality. And I will share with you if we get there kind of like my experiment for that. But I agree with you that they look the way they're supposed to look. What you don't really get a sense of is like, wouldn't I have a way bigger range with a staff than I have with size? Because it doesn't look like you do, right? Whether you do or not mechanically, we'll talk about, but like visually, it doesn't even look like you do.
Right. And that's kind of what and again, I didn't spend too much time, experimenting per se. Just my gut feel was, I'm like, I don't think that there's too much more range. And again, you'd think it would be stark, where it's like, but and to be fair, one of the nice things about like a pole arm is that you can totally pull it way in close to your body and fight in at a close range, which is what he's doing when he's swinging. He's swinging it like really close to his body, but it's not what you expect from Donatello. And to be fair, in the later games, the different weapons was like actually a difficulty setting, so Donatello was the easiest because he had the biggest range, and then Leonardo was the next easiest, and then Michelangelo, and then like if you were playing Raphael, probably you were the fourth person in the group, or like you also probably had the broken controller. Let me put it to you that way, right? Is that like if you're playing as Raphael with Turtles in Time with whoever you're playing with, you've also got the broken controller because
you have the Mad Catz controller or the buttons are all backwards and on the other side.
Yeah, one of the other things though that I'll throw into visuals, and then I've got a couple of notes. I got one other throwaway and then a couple notes on the audio. Is that the bosses? Now I'm blanking, but the bosses at least flash when they get low on health, which is
they have two flashes. I think they flash at probably somewhere around 50%, and then again at like a different flash at like 25%.
Mm-hmm. But that's nice,
great.
because one is it lets you know, hey, I'm doing damage, which is sometimes in games like this, you don't always know that. And two, like I'm making progress, which really amps up the tension of the battle. And one of the other things they do to amp up the tension is I'm pretty confident they screw with your hit points when your hit points get low. But we can talk about that in
probably. I mean that's a standard video game trick thing.
Well, it is now for sure, but I think back then it was less so, right? But I'm really confident that last pip is like 3 pips,
It is secretly more pips.
Right, which is fine, which is great because then what it does is all of a sudden, Rocksteady starts flashing super fast, and you're like, but I've only got 2 pips left. Oh no, now I only have 1, but he's so close to death, and like that feeling, which is I'm sure what they're going for, is really easier to achieve with those types of visuals.
Yeah, and I mean, because I have a similar note just even about the flashing is when you are wailing on them and they have their like they flash when they get hit, right? Which I think is literally called a hit flash or a hit spark, right? When it's like the all white like wang and they throw their head back and throw their arms back and they take damage. But then when you get them to, I'm going to just say it's 50 and 25%. When you get them to 50% health and now they're flashing constantly, and then you get them to 25% health, and I think they flash faster and different colors. It might just be faster, which creates like a strobe effect, but it is different. And the way that emotionally like ramps up the tension is palpable. Like it's one of those things that I'm actually pretty comfortable mentioning it just in visuals because I actually got to play this game a little bit with my older daughter because I don't usually get to play video games with her. And even in like the short amount of time she was in front of this game, like she noticed like oh, that means like something, right? And it was like flashing, like, yeah, right. So like just her seeing it, having a very, very low games literacy because she doesn't get to play a lot of video games. And she immediately connected like the emotional response that the developers expected her to have, which is like, wow, nailed it.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. So I think that's all good. And then the one throwaway note that I had is in the first level, Pizza Hut got some advertising in there.
It's in cool. Several levels.
Okay, that was the one I noticed it in. Was,
yeah, I think they stop after the third, maybe. But yeah, Pizza Hut, man, Pizza Hut.
Yeah, because I mean, and Pizza Hut still exists for sure, but man, Pizza Hut was the bomb diggity back in the day, man.
It was a different time, right? Like, and we were different people. I'm sure I felt differently about Pizza Hut as a child than I do now as an old man, right? Like,
yeah,
you just
because I mean, when you don't have to worry about your digestive system handling Pizza Hut because your digestive system handles everything, it changes things. That and so obviously, so one, Book It. I just remember Book It from Pizza Hut. Yeah. But the one thing that I remember, and this is actually a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle thing, was the TV show. There was an episode where like they open up a truck and like pizzas come flying out. One of the pizzas hits Michelangelo in the face, right? I actually got a really bad stomach virus when I was very young, right? So like I just couldn't really keep anything down for like a week, So I got over it eventually. But on like day 4, so all my mom was feeding me was like very, very like light, soft stuff, right? Mostly chicken noodle soup, right? Because it's good for you, and that's what you did. So on like day 3, I just remember I was sitting there, like feeling crappy and like watching this show. Michelangelo gets hit in the face with a pizza, and I just remember going, "Mom, I'm hungry," and she said, "I'll start warming up some soup." I'm not hungry anymore.
No, I'm hungry for a Pizza Hut pizza.
Yeah, because I remember seeing that, and then just in my mind, like I brought forward all of the Pizza Hut pizzas, and I was like, that is what I want. And it's like, I will get you chicken noodle soup. Apparently, I was not hungry. I was just craving Pizza Hut pizza.
Your body knows what it needs.
Yeah. It's like, give me this so that way at least I can taste something delicious before I throw it up, as opposed to this garbage you're feeding me.
Stupid chicken noodle soup. That's not even kind of pizza. I think this game actually shipped with like a bring this coupon to the store for free personal pan pizza. So I mean, this tie-in ran deep.
Yeah,
which I appreciate. Give me pizza.
Yeah, right. I mean, back in the day when Pizza Hut was king, Domino's was a distant second, and I guess Little Caesars existed. I don't know.
Yeah, at this time, yeah. I mean, I don't know. We're not gonna debate pizza because then I will also want pizza. The music in this game is jams.
It is. It's banging music, man. It's so good. Yeah. I mean, that's. I literally, my note says banging music. Just really, really enjoyable.
So the thing I want to talk about is I would love it if anybody in our audience has like way better music theory than I do, because mine's not very good. Several of the songs are obviously remixes of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles theme, right? The one we all know from the cartoon. A couple of the songs have like little pieces that are obviously inspired by that song, but then the rest of it sounds very different. And then there's a few songs that sound just nothing like it. And what I'm curious about is, are those songs still in some way variations on the theme? Like, are all like 10 music tracks, are they just all variations on the theme? Or is it just that several of them use, little snippets, and then several of them are original songs? That's what I think is probably happening. But there's just a little part of me that's like, no, I want every single song to just be a remix of the theme song. It's like, oh, this is the theme song, but in a minor key and slowed way down. And this is the theme song, but in like, a weird jazz key and sped way up, right? Like, I don't think that's what's happening, but I just kind of want it to be.
It could be. Let's say that's what's happening, just because why not? Who are we hurting? So yeah. And the only other real sound note that I have is, this is a weird thing. I find the sound that it makes when you hit mousers deeply satisfying. I don't know why.
That kind of metal clanky noise.
Clink,
yeah.
Like that. Yeah. Because that's the exact same in my mind. It's at least very similar to the sound that it makes in Turtles in Time. Where they just all make that noise, and I don't know what it is, man, but like my brain just really absolutely loves that sound.
The Mousers are the little like pod looking thing. They have the whip.
No, I forget what those are called. No, the Mousers are I think they make the same sound, but the Mousers are the little robot. They're Mousers, man. I don't know what to tell you. I can't make it any simpler than that. Yeah, they're the little like rat things. You know?
Yeah. I think that is this because all the robots probably make the same like metally clanky noise.
Yeah, they're also like they are also robots, but they're not the whip robots, which suck. I don't like those. But
I was gonna say maybe the reason you like that sound is because it means you've hit them and they're really annoying. But my big thumbs up to the sound in this game is this game's a brawler and it's a NES era brawler, which means there's a pretty small amount of sound effects and you are hearing them a lot. None of them ever get annoying, and some of them are like metal clanking, kind of clashy sound effects that you would think run a high risk of becoming annoying. But I played through the whole game and never felt like, oh my God, like if I hear the, foot soldier exploding noise or the, weapon thwack noise one more time, I'm going to kill myself. But it's just, I don't know if it's because the music is such jams. I'm just like not even paying attention or because I'm so into it that like that's just washing over me. But I was afraid going into it. I was like, I'm going to hear these 2 or 3 sound effects like thousands and thousands and thousands of times, even just in the, 2 weeks that we have to play the game. But just never got irksome, which I always like golf clap for the effects artists because that is probably a way taller order than I realize.
Right. And also too, it does seem like that, or at least in my memory of it, that it didn't cause constant ducking out of the music,
Right.
Which again will inherently make a sound effect more annoying if, you're listening to this awesome sound, and now in order to play the game, you have to make the sound, the awesome music go away in order to kill the bad guy. So so no, good. Are you good on audiovisual?
Yeah, we can go to gameplay.
No, I got another thing we gotta do first. Which turtle were you, man?
As a kid, or when I play, like when I'm in my backyard, or do you mean playing the game?
When you were a kid in your backyard.
Raphael.
Yeah, that tracks 100%, man.
Red and violent, like.
Yep.
Yeah, color red, likes to hit things like that. Yeah. That lined up with me as a kid, and to a much lesser extent lines up with me now. Like I don't just run around punching. I don't just punch strangers. I only punch people I know. But
I mean, so does Raphael.
I feel like he'd hit a stranger.
He would, though. Yeah. I mean, if it got between him and some pizza,
especially like, when we say Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, we mean like the 80s, 90s cartoon, right? But some of the later versions of that show, like they did like a CGI one, there were a couple other animated ones. There's like half a dozen iterations of the show. In some of them, he is a sociopath. Like he is a hyper violent nutcase. I don't identify with that. The like cutesy Warner Brothers-esque Bugs Bunny violent Raphael, like, he's like, he's ready for a fight. Like that is a very different kind of adorable childlike violence, not the started 2 world wars kind of violence.
Yeah, the complete edgelord. Because I mean, because sometimes when they do it, they're like, well, it has to be the original Mutant Ninja Turtles, but supercharged. And so then everybody is, Leonardo is a complete staunch, humorless samurai. And it's just like, well, that wasn't his thing. He was just the leader.
Well, and you always know. Like before you even watch a single episode, you can tell that that's what they did with the characters, because the original characters are like very round and soft, probably made it really easy to make toys and stuff out of them because their design. Some of the later iterations, like everything is full of corners, like just super sharp and jagged. And it's like, oh, okay. So Michelangelo's now going to be a full blown stoner. Donatello's going to be like a typical geek, right? Then you've got the humorless samurai, the violent sociopath. Like, it's just like, okay, we get it. You put more corners on everything. Shut up.
Yep. the interesting thing for me is that, because, like, it's the four humors theory, right? Where it's kind of, who was your favorite, mutant growing up? And there's like a handful that everybody says. But for Ninja Turtles, everybody has a different one, right? Because it is very, you're like, oh, I identify with this character. The weird thing for me is that I was always, like, 80% of the time I was Leonardo. The other 20% of the time I was, like, if somebody else was Leonardo, then my second go-to is Donatello. And then later on, being like a laboratory director, I feel like that's 80% Leonardo and 20% Donatello. And I was like, this is, man, so now with, like, so you'll appreciate this. So with Teddy, like, he's been playing for a while, the new one, Shredder's Revenge. And so probably, beaten it like 8 times now. I was like, okay, buddy, which Ninja Turtle are you? Which one's your favorite? And he was like, Raphael. And I was like, all right, we'll see how this plays out.
We turn out fine.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but I was like, okay, well, hopefully he'll be the fun-loving cartoon Raphael and not the edgelord sociopath Raphael.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a reasonable thing to wish for your kid,
right? So yeah, that was the thing I had to ask, was which Ninja Turtle you were. But
no, that is a critical part of the discussion. I would have been heartbroken if we left out. So you're well within your podcast host rights.
Excellent. So gameplay.
It's not as complicated as the later games, man. Like, this is the through line for any negative thing I would say about the game. They could all be traced back to what you do in level 1 is the same thing you do in level 10, except with more things on the screen, which, as we mentioned, you can't always see, right? And so, this is a Nintendo game, so I don't know what the controls were like in the arcade. We didn't play the arcade game. On the Nintendo version, you have attack, you have jump. If you jump and press attack, you do like a downward kick, right? Kind of like a I didn't think about this until just now, but exactly like the downward kick that Alucard does in Symphony of the Night, he now does a Ninja Turtles kick. And
that came first,
right? So all the turtles do the downward kick. So having a different weapon doesn't make your jump attack any different.
And the downward kick automatically angles you.
Yes, it's like a fully scripted animation. Up to and including, because you can hit the attack button at different parts in your jump arc, and you will have a shorter distance to travel to the ground, but you move the exact same speed, the exact same way, right? It's very, like, this is a tool. Use it to solve problems, right? Not like this is a way you can move about the world. But then if you do kind of like a rolling, like if you roll your thumb from jump to attack, like, you don't press them at the exact same time. It's like jump attack. You will do sort of like a half jump where you spin your body and you like swing your weapon out kind of wide. And I played for a couple hours before I realized that was a thing you could do. And then once I realized that was a thing you can do, it became the only thing I did, because that one hits almost every regular enemy. So if you're playing by yourself, or even if you're playing with other people and you're getting swarmed by enemies, it's really worth it to get good at executing that maneuver. But that is where tactics stops. There's no charge up moves. There's no super moves. There's no team up moves if you're playing with multiple people. There's no, you can't like make bad guys like trip and fall in holes or have them get knocked over by environmental hazards or anything. Like, there is, you hit them with your weapon. You hit them with your weapon on the first screen and on the last screen, and that's it. You can't run in this, right? There's no dash charge. There's no slide kick. There's no nothing. Like, this is the purest, most simplistic version. It's the first one of this formula. And I think that single thing dates this more than all the NES hardware limitations.
So yeah, 110% agree with all of that, right? Is that there's just not a lot. Once I could not really think of a reason to want to play to level 10, because it's just the same. It just, and even because there are so few ways to interact with the environment, to your point, right, is that you're given the tool of punching and the tool of jumping and the tool, like you're given these 4 tools, right? And that's it, so the number of novel ways to solve problems is super limited, so as opposed to playing some modern brawlers and things like that, where you could be like, oh well, in this one I think I'm going to try using mostly my super attack, but in this one I'm going to try, I think that for this one jump kicking is probably the best way to go, and for this one I'm going to have this person, I'm going to have Donatello kind of like handle this area because all of these guys have large reach. And I'm, as Raphael, who does more damage but is shorter, I'm going to get all up on this guy. Like all of that. None of that exists, right? I will say, though, that it is like a weird kind of proto Ninja Turtles game in the sense that there are some things that I didn't know were callbacks to this original game, but they are, So first of all, basically the fact that there are the foot soldiers, palette swapped foot soldiers, right? The whip robots, the mousers, and that's kind of it, right? There's I think there's and then there are the bosses, right? But yeah, those are the bad guys, and all of the other Ninja Turtles pretty much the same thing. Maybe add in one or two other bad guy types. That's it. But the two things I found particularly novel, where I was like, oh my god, I can't believe that came from this, is almost every Ninja Turtles game that I can think of had the weird canisters that come out of the ground and freeze you.
Yeah, that's
they
probably
all have that.
That's probably the environmental hazard I hate the most. That is in here. It's not until either the very last level or the second to last level. They're in the Technodrome.
Right, so it's like way later, Yeah, but it when I saw that, I was like, oh my god, because I've been playing Shredder's Revenge, and they still have that in there, and I was like, oh, like from Turtles in Time, that's pretty cool. No, not like from Turtles in Time, like from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2 for the NES. Like, oh, and the other thing that I thought was interesting is that Baxter Stockman is a bastard in every single iteration of this game because he flies,
Yeah.
And so it just like apparently they decided that hey, at some point you've had your fun and you're done and you're gonna have to deal with this nonsense. And so because he flies around in this one and he's an absolute nightmare to deal with, and I've just remembered him flying around in Turtles in Time and being an absolute nightmare to deal with, and in Shredder's Revenge he flies around and is an absolute nightmare to deal with. So I was just
kind of like, enemies and brawlers, dude.
Yeah, it's just not what brawlers are made for. And now, to be fair to the later Ninja Turtles' credit, is that normally Baxter Stockman is the only flying enemy, So they're like, look, we know that this sucks, but we kind of did it on purpose, Like here's your broccoli, eat your broccoli. Okay, now look at how flavorful everything tastes compared to this garbage broccoli, right? But yeah, so
now look at how delicious this pizza is.
But I will say though that it was just really interesting to see it really feels like a skeleton of a game, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean just that what else was the NES going to do? It needs fleshing out, and that's what all the other Ninja Turtles did, was they took this skeleton and they just kept fleshing it out and sculpting it, and eventually it becomes Michelangelo's David. Haha, I did the thing. But yeah, that's kind of what I thought about like the gameplay as a whole. Is it's all there,
So I will say, well, let me first talk about the difference between the turtles, because I did a little, not like a super scientific experiment, but I think Leonardo is about average on range and speed. Donatello is a little slower, but has a little more range. And then Michelangelo and Raphael have a little less range, but are a little faster. So I don't think any of them hit harder, because I'm pretty sure enemies always went down in the same number of hits. But I think that's what you get, right? Is either a little bit more range or a little bit more speed. But even there, the differences did not feel massive, and I had to be really looking for them, right?
Right.
So that's obviously not the direction like modern mascot games have gone. Like even in modern versions of Mario Kart, like each driver is still different, even though you can customize the kart, right? Which is like insane to me, because it's like, let me just drive as the character I want to drive as. Why are you? They're in a car. Like is Bowser so heavy that the difference between his weight and like baby Peach's weight actually makes the entire car perform differently? Like, if so, these are not reasonable vehicles for them to be competing with, right? Like, so, you know, the later Ninja Turtles games have much more pronounced differences between the turtles. And I was at first lamenting the fact that they're not that different in this game, but you know what that frees you up to? Play as your favorite, right? So if you come over and you want to play as Leonardo and I want to play as Raphael, like, one of us is not having the obviously superior experience or the obviously inferior experience. We can just play as the one we like to play as. So having those differences be small to the point of them almost being like impossible to even notice, I was like, there is a real upside to that when you're talking about like a mascot brawler, right? Like a beat 'em up. The other thing is the repetitive.
Sorry, real fast before you get too much further.
No, you go.
Baby Peach ostensibly weighs like 10 pounds, right? You know, maybe 20. Bowser weighs 1,600 pounds.
That's his canonical weight.
Yeah. Because I looked it up. So I would make the argument that in a go-kart, that could make some significant performance.
No, I agree. And that's why they're inappropriate vehicles, because then Peach, by virtue of being an immortal baby person, has an advantage that her car is better suited to her size.
Well, but I mean, like in horse racing, right? Like jockeys weight, you know, like arguably the lighter jockeys have like a slight advantage, which is why they have smaller jockeys, right?
So you're saying that Bowser is ill-suited to kart racing, not that the cart is ill-suited.
Because otherwise we have to assume that horses are ill-suited to horse racing.
Nope, that I'm gonna just go ahead and stick with that opinion because it is way funnier.
Yeah, it is. Look, man, if Bowser and Peach have these types of differences, then we shouldn't have horse racing anymore. What the hell are you talking about? So okay, yes. now continue.
No, another worthy side note. So when you are playing this game by yourself, I think the limited mechanics and the fact that you can't really use the environment to strategize or anything does become a massive detriment. Like it starts to suck away from the fun of the game, I think, in a pretty real way that is problematic. That melts away a lot when you are playing with another person or other people, right? Because the NES version, you can only play with one other person. In the original arcade, right out of the gate, you had 4 people. So like they knew what this was supposed to be, right? Golden Axe, Streets of Rage, Final Fight, like all these games, no matter how much or how little strategy there is, you're also supposed to play with other people. And the fact that having another person having another turtle does actually mean
a person. They're just not human.
That's true. Yeah. I forget that like personhood does not mean humanity. And you would think as someone who plays D&D, like I would be able to internalize that, but for some reason I struggle with that.
No, one of my favorite examples of that is that I make the argument that Superman, though not human, is more of a person than Lex Luthor is, which the best Superman comics are written around that concept, you know?
You're right. You know, having another turtle person does give you, I think, just enough additional strategy and ways to interact with your attackers that it washes away a lot of the, oh my God, this is getting so repetitive, right? Because if one of us makes a mistake, the other person can like, do they come in and help, or do they let you, try to get back on your feet and figure it out, right? If we are splitting the screen and you're dealing with enemies on the left and I'm dealing with enemies on the right, and you get smashed against the opposite wall and now we are both on the same side of the screen, do we now deal with this new reality, or do we try to, return to dividing and conquering? So I would say like the mechanics in this are simple to the point of requiring a second player, whereas some later brawlers tried to kind of account for that and say like, well, we need to make the universe fun and interesting enough that you could play this by yourself and still feel like you have tactical and strategic choices. This to me does not feel like that. They're basically saying you have a couple of tools and we expect there to be 2 of you.
Yeah, and I don't know if in the original arcade you could play as all four. I know in this game you can only play as...
In the arcade, you could do all four. The NES was,
Right.
of course, limited to 2.
Right, because there were only 2 places you could put a controller. But yeah, I think that to your point, even, you know, Streets of Rage, all that, is that, yeah, community is one of the core aesthetics, right? You know, so you're supposed to be playing with a friend. You're supposed to be and when you add that layer to it, it transforms a game, because the main thing that you're doing now is playing a game with a friend, not playing the game for the sheer enjoyment of playing the game. Like, you know, if you look at it from a purely Machiavellian or, you know, point of view, is that at the end of a game session of Final Fantasy, right, you have hopefully gotten some enjoyment from the game for yourself, right? At the end of this, you have hopefully gotten some enjoyment out of the game for yourself, but you have also spent time bonding with another human, right? You know, so it takes a lot of the edges off of some of the corners. What I will say, though, when you play it by yourself, it is highly repetitive. And I do think that there was a huge opportunity missed with, and I don't know why, with not having the environment interact with bad guys. Like, the environment interacts with you. So I don't know why it would have been such a hurdle to have the environment also interact with the bad guys, you know?
No, dude, I have a dedicated section about this in my notes. It's just like, this feels like a strategic miss, because this is one of the only additional ways you could potentially interestingly or cleverly deal with enemies, and it's just completely cut off from you as a player, which of course later Turtles games went on to include this, where enemies can fall in pits and get knocked over by stuff and everything. But this is not just the Turtles' fault. A lot of early brawlers are like this. A lot of early brawlers, the enemies are completely immune from the things you are not completely immune from. And I don't know if we talked about this on any of the other brawlers that we've reviewed, but now that I recognize this, I hate it. Like, if that giant bowling ball can kill me, it should be able to kill them. If the fire can hurt me, it should be able to hurt them. If the lasers can hurt me, the ice freezing, the pits, everything. Like, otherwise, it's like I'm fighting ghosts that are just floating through the world, but somehow are not of the world.
Well, and also, too, in an era where oftentimes controllers got put into screens because the game was cheating, right? You know, like, this feels like the game's cheating, right? Because when, and also it's bad. It's, you know what it is? It's bad conveyance. Because if a bad guy can walk, so when I saw the giant, you know, for whatever reason in this burning building, the giant steel balls coming flying down the stairs like they do in burning buildings.
Are they supposed to be construction, like wrecking balls?
I mean, that's probably the best explanation for one and only one of them, but, you know.
Yeah, but why are there an infinite number of them?
Yeah, and some of them coming down in pairs, you know, like. Just,
well, there's 2 turtles, you see, so.
Yeah, so we needed 17,000 wrecking balls on site, and some of them we throw down in pairs. But anyway, but when it just went right by the bad guys, I was like, the only reason this would exist is because it can hurt me. So that made sense. But then when they popped out of the sewer thing and then walked over the sewer ground, I'm like, maybe this doesn't hurt me. You know, maybe I also won't be. Maybe this was just a novel way for the person to enter the screen. No, it hurts you. So it actually kind of is just garbage conveyance on top of being everything else that's wrong with it. You know, so again, I don't know why that decision was made, but it was.
I honestly think this is one of the few pure artifacts of the time, right? Like, there's a lot of things in here that obviously have evolved as game design has evolved, but enemies are completely separate from all of the environmental hazards. Feels like well, that's just how you make brawlers. And maybe it was hard to code for. Maybe it was it made the hazards harder to design. I don't know. Maybe there was a good reason that all like early 8 and 16-bit era brawlers, maybe it's just because it makes the game harder. You have to deal with something and they don't. But it makes the world feel stupider, and I hate it.
Agreed. I will say one of the other more meaty notes I have is that So one of the very, very first things that I realized when we were doing this podcast many moons ago now is that which plane of existence that you're in a brawler and how the game handles that math is super important, right? And I remembered
getting that wrong breaks the entire game.
It does. And that's why Golden Axe, I was like, this game's awesome. And then went back and played. I'm like, this game terrible, because it did not do that thing well. In this one, it's not game breaking, but I will say that I feel that which plane you're in seems equal but not fair, right? And I say that to say that I think that when you can hit a bad guy, they can hit you. And when you can't hit a bad guy, they can't hit you. I think that is true. I think the problem is that the game knows exactly when it can hit you, and you don't always know that, right? Because you're human and the game's the game, right? So it's equal. I don't think that it's fair, you know? And I say that, and obviously we can talk about this more when we actually review the game, but just to in this one area, juxtapose it, because I did do an experiment in Shredder's Revenge, and it's super not equal in a modern brawler, right? Because literally I watched somebody punch at me. I did not move at all, and they did not move, and then I punched, and I hit them. And I was like, that's the way it should be, though, because I probably would have guessed by him hitting me, like swinging at me, that, like, that should probably register a hit. But it didn't. I was like, oh, okay. But I still feel like I should be able to hit you. So we probably were not in the same plane of existence, but we were within close enough. The game was like, the player, there's a window where I can hit them, and they can't hit me. And I don't think that exists here. So it feels like sometimes that you swing on a guy and miss, and then he moves like a pixel down and then tags you, and that doesn't feel good.
Did you play any of Kirby and the Forgotten Realm, or what I like to call the Last of Kirb?
No, I actually the only Kirby game I played was the one for the Game Boy back in the day.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. I never really got into that franchise.
So Kirby and the Forgotten Realm is an excellent game. It's a fun kind of bubblegummy platformer, but in true Kirby fashion, like there is actually a fair amount of depth there if you want to engage with it. Or you can just button mash and still eventually be successful. But it's fun. I like that game quite a bit. The reason I bring it up is most of the Kirby franchise, particularly the Kirby games that people think are good, are all 2D, right? So you don't have the plane of existence problem because everybody's on the same plane all the time, always, right? So in Forgotten Land, because it's 3D, even though it kind of operates like a 2D platformer because the way the camera moves and stuff, like you don't really control the camera. They made, I saw an interview with some of the developers, and they made an explicit decision in how the game engine calculates whether or not a hit should register is how it looks from the camera, because that's where the player is. So
interesting.
What they did was they showed like in universe, like here is Kirby and he swings his sword and the little like swooshy, blade blast like comes off the sword. And then they freeze it because this is like in their developer tools. They freeze it and they rotate the camera and you can see that this is not going to hit. Like it's not even close. But then they put the camera back to where it would be in the game. And you can see that from this point of view, it actually does look like it's going to hit because it's just the way the angle is. So they calculate collision using that viewing angle as like one of the main, if not the main, like deciding input in the equation. And modern brawlers do something similar, right? Where they basically say, should this have hit mathematically? Maybe not, right? Like if an enemy took a swing from this position, maybe that won't connect. But to the player, they're going to see Leonardo swinging his big ass swords around or Donatello swing that giant stick around. And they're going to be like, why did my shillelagh not knock that foot soldier's noggin off, right? And that's just, it feels bad, right? And this game is way better than Golden Axe, you're right. But there are a lot of times where you, the player, would say, my sword just passed right through his throat, and there he still stands. And that, it feels bad. It feels bad when you feel like your eyes have betrayed you. You're like, well, but it looks like I hit him. And I think about that. Cool. I'll try and find the video and send it to you that with the Kirby developers, because it's just like, that's such a modern game design concept to be that aware of, well, it needs to work the way it looks like it should work.
The way I always picture it is that, like, if you imagine like a bell curve, right? And like the standard deviations, and you've seen all that broken out, right? Is that like the width of the thing is that the bad guy should hit with 95% confidence and the player should hit with 99% confidence, right? Like we get an extra standard deviation, so there should be, and again, it's not huge, like 95 versus 99, right? But it's just that extra little bit of width that says, yeah, the bad guys who operate perfectly don't get that extra little bit of width. They're the computer. They know how the math is playing. But you, the human, get a little bit more give before it's like, no, that's not cool. So I think that, and then that ties nicely into, I think, probably my last big note, which is so continues take you back to the beginning of the stage, which is, from what I could tell, right?
Mm-hmm.
So which is better than nothing, but at the same point in time, if you're struggling to clear the first stage, continues are now meaningless,
Yeah, true.
So to me, is I feel like that, a continue, it would be nicer. I mean, like, is if it was like, okay, if there was at least a checkpoint, right? Because a stage is maybe 10 minutes long. That's just a long way to get punted back if you're struggling, and especially to your point, where most of the time when you're punted back in a game, it's because there's a new skill you got to learn or something like that. There are no new skills to learn. There's 3 things you can do. I just want to punch a different colored foot soldier, man. Let me do that. So because I really struggled to get past the first level because I wasn't very good at the game.
So I agree with you that the continues are basically worthless in level 1. What I do like about the system they have for continuing play, like as in ongoing, is of course it's hidden behind button inputs because it's 1990, right? Based on a 1989 arcade game. But there is a give me 9 lives code. There's a let me select the level I want to play from code, and there's a give me 9 lives plus let me pick the level I want to play from code.
Oh yeah, you see that completely makes that note evaporate. I didn't know any of that, but like that's neat.
Well, and this is maybe I said there was only the one before, but this is another, like, you would never do this now because it's not fun. It's not fun to have what we now consider to be a basic way to declare how you would like to interact with the game locked behind an opaque code, right? And there are good reasons for that, right? Not necessarily reasons that people are happy with, but it's like they wanted you to buy the strategy guide, or they wanted you to have to talk to your friends on the playground. So the more people are talking about the game, the better. Go share knowledge about the game. It means people are playing the game, right? Like, it's an arcade port, right? So the arcade just unlimited lives as long as you have unlimited quarters, right? So it's like, I get why. And I tried to play the game with the understanding of I would have had access to this information. It's not in the manual. I checked, like, you would have had to have gotten it from a strategy guide or from the tips line or whatever, but
or through research.
I mean, I guess if I looked it up on the 1990 version of the internet, like, so yeah, like a BBS, I guess. So some weirdo at a university would be like, oh yeah, here's the code for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
So I have a slight side story, but it happened to me literally the other day. But speaking of opaqueness, and so to kind of give the game a bit of a pass because this still exists, I was trying to enter in a function into Excel, and since you're in IT, this is my way of lodging a formal complaint with your industry.
Yes, I will. When we're done recording and I go have tea and scones with Bill Gates, we'll talk about
with the
this.
Illuminati. Yeah. No, so is I was trying to, and I don't have a lot of experience in this particular area, but it's basically it said, I was like, I want to do thing A. So I looked up how to do it. I'm like, okay, I understand how this function works, and I plugged it in. And the function didn't work the way I wanted it to. So I'm like troubleshooting. And it was an array function. I was like, oh, that's the problem, is it's an array function. So I need the little squirrely brackets not just the parentheses brackets, right? So I put the little squirrely brackets in, and Excel goes, nah, it's text now, baby. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense because it's supposed to be an array. And so I take the squirrely ones out and then I put them in a different place, and it's like, nope, no idea what you're talking about now, bro. And so I was screwing around with this for a solid 20 minutes. Do you know how you get the thing to acknowledge that it's an array?
I'm going to guess either angle brackets or backticks.
Neither. It is the squirrely brackets, right? Yeah. But it has to put the squirrely brackets in. You can't. And the way you get it to do it is Control Shift Enter.
What?
When you are done entering in the equation, you hit Control Shift Enter instead of just Enter. Then it puts the brackets in, and now it recognizes it as an array.
Well, I am going to have to bring this up with Bill. This is...
Please do, because I was very, very inside. I literally, at that point, I said, that's stupid. And then from another office, somebody thought that I was talking to them. And then, and I was like, no, this is good. More people need to know how dumb this is. I say all of that to say that, like if Microsoft Excel is still hiding things behind this nebulous, you have to hit Control Shift Enter, right? I mean, you could probably give, I now have a new level of tolerance for 90s video games having weird nebulous codes, because modern Excel has weird nebulous codes. So
yeah, no, I appreciate that you're like, okay, this is not just a problem from 3 decades ago. Somehow this is still a problem today.
Yeah, this is a friggin' today problem. The last big note that I had was I didn't feel that baddies staggered long enough when you hit them. So a lot of times I ended up...
their hit response, or when they got knocked down?
Their hit response. So when I would hit them, one of the things that is fun in brawlers in general is that once you start hitting a bad guy, that bad guy is kind of yours to lose, right? So as long as you don't pause or anything like that, you just can wail on them. And then your main thing is is somebody coming up behind me and hitting me back in the head with the pipe or whatever, right? In this one, a lot of times I actually went shot for shot with bad guys, where I would hit them and I'd be hitting the punch button as fast as I could, but they would stagger, and then because they moved slightly out of frame or whatever, they would then immediately punch me back and interrupt my attack. So I didn't feel that when I compared how long they were staggered versus Turtles in Time or versus Shredder's Revenge, it was not even close to as long. But again, it's meant to suck quarters, so there's a difference there.
Well, this is an interesting way to frame this, because the way I thought of this being a problem is not that their knockback was insufficient, which I don't think is a wrong way to measure it, but I was measuring it from the other end of, you don't really combo in this game, right? So when we were somewhat sarcastically saying oh, you could jump and hit, that's it. No, really.
Yeah.
If you press the attack button repeatedly, you repeatedly do the same attack, right? It's not where a boxer might do jab, jab, right hook. It's just jab, 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 jab. And if that gets interrupted, then you get knocked back, and then you jab, jab. It's almost charming, and it's simple as how simplistic it is, but it does create a problem where if you are not always pressing the attack button as fast as the game will accept that input, then you're gonna get tagged always, right? Because you never have a hit, big hit finisher. There's none of that, right? So I think it's interesting to place that on the foot soldiers. They don't have a long enough knockback animation. Whereas to me, I blame the Turtles completely. They're just you need to mix up your attacks, brah. I am not a professional Ninja Turtle, but even I know you can't just keep doing the same thing over and over.
I am not a professional turtle, however. But yeah, no, that was my other big one. The only other thing that I'll say is that one, this is more of an audio note, but April's scream is sad, man. That just is not great. And then just also the fact that the entire game is centered around the mechanical challenge of rescuing April O'Neil. I didn't care for that. It's very much
you aged out of damsels in distress
a little bit. But also too is that's not the character, is that there were times in the show where they had to save April, but there were more times that I think of where April was actually helpful, So she's not Princess Peach, she's April O'Neil, And so the fact that they were like, okay, well, instead of April being, ideally a playable character, but even just somebody who occasionally comes in and helps you, and Shredder needs to be stopped for reasons other than he's kidnapped somebody, right? I mean, Shredder's the villain, So I just felt that it was not entirely true to the character and more of a 90s trope than this is what April O'Neil is,
Yeah. I have put no thought into that until I just thought it was tropey, but I hadn't spent any more time on it. But you're right. Like, she deserves better than that.
Yeah. Man.
Women in general, but like, this is already an established character who is like a strong and helpful. She's obviously Lois Lane, right? Like, she is a capable journalist who is in the fray because she's not afraid and the reporting needs to get done. Like, she's so obviously Lois Lane, right? And and every time Lois Lane gets captured, they make a point to show her being brutally defiant, right? Even though she doesn't have superpowers and she can't do anything to necessarily save herself, like, she's never like, oh, help me, right? Like, she's always just like, Lex, you're a friggin' knob, right? And like, maybe in the arcade cabinet, they have cutscenes where it cuts to April O'Neil calling Shredder a weenie, and that would actually make you feel a little better, right? It's like, oh, April's not here helping because she's been captured, but she's not off somewhere shrieking, right? She's off somewhere telling Shredder he's a dork.
Well, and also too, even when like they do like the Lois Lane has been captured thing, like most of the time, if they're writing it well, right, is that the person who is captured has not resigned themselves to their fate, and the only agent of their survival is the hero, right? Is that normally they're like, okay, hopefully the Ninja Turtles will come save me, but I'm also going to see if I can sneak away, or hey, this particular, or especially when they can bring their own skills to bear. So like, for example, I can help the Ninja Turtles save me by accessing this camera equipment, which I'm very familiar with, and using it to send a message to everyone, or whatever, right? Or even more heroic would be like sending a message to, the getting the camera stuff online, sending a message to the news people saying, Shredder's going to do this terrible thing. You need to evacuate this area, because then they're being helpful and selfless. There's a million different ways to attack it. But yeah, like Princess Peach, I know that in later iterations, she's had many powers and they really fleshed her out as a character. But initially, the main thing was Princess Peach was there to be saved by Mario. She was a mechanics damsel for the mechanics villain, right? But April O'Neil was never that. So I was just like, oh, well, that's kind of a bummer. And especially because in Mario, right, it was like save the damsel in distress. That was Mario's narrative ostensibly, right? But the Shredder does all sorts of horrible stuff, right? Like all the time that could just need to be stopped, right? Like Shredder is trying to blow up Manhattan to do something or whatever. Go stop him from doing that,
Yeah, kidnapping Princess Peach is Bowser's crime. The rest of the time, he's kind of not really hurting anything, but Shredder is a villain in his own right. This also reduces his complexity as a villain. Because it's like, this will lure the Ninja Turtles to my lair and then I can defeat them. And it's like, no, they were already coming. You're already a criminal. They're already vigilantes. Like, you didn't you didn't need to be like, oh, but will you come and fight me if I've kidnapped your girlfriend? And it's like, dude, we were already in the Turtlemobile, like driving to your house to kick your ass. Like, why'd you do this?
Because you know what it is? Hat on a hat.
It's totally a hat on a hat. So April deserves better, and Shredder is better than this.
Yeah, everyone is better than this. This is one of those situations where you walk into the room and your two kids are like murdering each other, and you're like, everyone is better than this. Like, all of you. I expect better from all of you.
Well, who's in trouble? All of you.
Everyone. Burn it all down.
All right. There's what else to say? Is there's nothing. I would like it, I think, if you went first, because I came into this feeling complicated. So do you think that this game held up?
So I'm going to give this one a nostalgia monocle, because I think that it is the skeleton. Like I said, it's the skeleton for all of these other games. So there's some things that it does like very well, and I think that. So would I recommend somebody going back and playing this game? Yeah, in a way, just because it strips away so much of the other stuff to just its bare bones. So yeah, if somebody said like, "Hey man, I got 20 minutes and I can play any game in the world. Would you recommend me playing this?" I'd be like, yeah, for about like 20 minutes, maybe an hour or so. If you're looking for if they said, give me a great Ninja Turtles brawler, I'd say Turtles in Time, or, Shredder's Revenge, or any of the other ones, right?
But the Manhattan Project, which was also on the Nintendo, but is an iteration in the right direction.
Right. So basically they took this first thing and then just iterated on it. And it's and unlike Mega Man X, it's just kept getting better, right? So there's no reason for you to go back to so I would say no nostalgia goggles if I said, go back and play this. But in my mind, there's no reason to go back to the beginning of the iteration unless you're interested in this thing specifically, So that's why I kind of lean on nostalgia monocle, because the nostalgia goggles would be, there's no reason to play this game unless you played it before, right? There is a reason to play this game if you're kind of interested in what it looks like with all of the stuff stripped away, right? So the analogy I can come up with is that there's some things, like that are kind of good on their own, and some things that, like are revivified, right? By other stuff, right? So Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo, right? I think like we all kind of know who they are, like in and of themselves. Like Leonardo da Vinci, incredibly famous inventor, right? Michelangelo, you have Michelangelo's David, a bunch of very, very famous art that we just kind of know of, right? I'm really confident that the reason why Donatello and Raphael are well-known Renaissance painters is because of the Ninja Turtles, right?
I'm trying to think if I could name even a single work from either of them.
Right.
And I cannot.
Yeah. So that's the thing, is that that they're Renaissance painters, right? Or Renaissance artists, but they're more so Ninja Turtles. So I think, so I think that this game falls more, this game's more of a Raphael and less of a Leonardo.
That's cold. So I settled on no nostalgia goggles required, with an asterisk, which is you
require a nostalgia goggle.
You must play this game with another person. Okay. It is. I think you're right. Like, this is the skeleton of what we now know, came in the later games in the series. And those bones are virtually unchanged, right? It's not like, oh, they have similar bones in the future games. No, this game is the skeleton that is under the muscles and sinew and organs of the later games, like just full stop. That being said, it is simplistic to the point of boredom if you're not playing with another person. If you're playing with another person, there's enough here, right? If you are two skeletons out on Halloween night, like spooking children, like that's fun. If you're just a jerk on like a random Wednesday scaring little children as a skeleton, like not so much, right? So like you really need the community aspect to get this to be mechanically interesting enough. But then that asterisk has like, I think you call it a dagger, the little T.
Yeah.
So that asterisk has a dagger, which is, but like don't play this game, not because there's anything wrong with it, but just because the sequel to this game, the Manhattan Project, is better, right? And then Turtles in Time is way better. And even if you just went and played this game in an actual arcade cabinet, it would be better because it didn't have a lot of the limitations that made it kind of reductive on the NES. So like, is there anything wrong with it that requires nostalgia goggles? Like, no, right? No nostalgia goggles required, but like, time has made turtle soup of this game.
The curtain falls, the music plays, the credits roll, then it all fades to black, and you're left by yourself. The fanfare is gone, there's no player two there by your side to share victories won. But as you slowly progress down the hall to your bed, a few great events leak back into your head. from the time that you spent traversing the land, battling evil, fighting the darkness, just sword in hand. Your memories creeping with the edge of a smile. You realize again what you lost for a while. You're gonna think back much less on how you saved the day